I adopt a child, but no one else can see him. I never planned on adopting a child. It just happened. Loneliness does strange things to a person. I had spent the last 5 years drifting through life, detached, empty, no family, few friends. Work was the only thing keeping me from slipping into something darker. Then I saw the listing. Urgent placement needed. Immediate adoption. No fees required. The website was obscure, buried in the depths of the internet. It didn't have a formal agency name, just a simple form, a grainy black and white photo of a small boy, and a message. Elias is a quiet, well-behaved child, looking for a home, loves to read. No known relatives, no details about his past, no contact number, just a single button. Take him home. Something about it bothered me, but at the same time, it felt meant to be, like the ad was waiting for me. I clicked it. The confirmation page simply said, Elias will arrive soon. I didn't enter an address. I didn't fill out any paperwork. But the next evening, as the sun sank into the horizon, I heard a soft knock at my door. And there he was. Small, pale, dark hair falling over wide glassy eyes. He wore a simple, old-fashioned outfit. Too clean, too perfect. He had no bags, no belongings, just himself. He smiled up at me. Hello? Something about his voice felt off, hollow, like an echo. But I shook it off. Maybe he was just shy. I crouched down, forcing a smile. Hey buddy, you must be Elias. He nodded. No delivery van, no social worker, no car engine rumbling in the distance. Nothing. He had just appeared, standing there, waiting for me. I should have closed the door, but instead, I stepped aside and said, come in. At first, it was fine. Elias was polite. Too polite. He didn't throw tantrums, didn't beg for toys or TV. He never even asked for food. I had to remind him to eat. Most kids his age were full of energy, but Elias, he just sat there, quiet, staring, watching. The first time I felt true unease was when my best friend, Lisa, came over a few days later. We were sitting in the living room, chatting over coffee, when Elias shuffled in. I smiled. Hey buddy, do you want to say hi to Lisa? Lisa's expression didn't change. She just took a sip of her coffee. I cleared my throat. Lisa. She blinked at me. What? I frowned. Elias. I was asking if he wanted to say hi. Lisa's brows knitted together. She glanced around the room, confused. Who? I stared at her. I looked at Elias. He was standing right there, but Lisa's eyes passed through him like he wasn't real. A cold chill rushed through me. I let out a nervous laugh. Very funny. Lisa set her mug down. I don't know what you're talking about. I turned to Elias. My throat felt dry. Elias, say something. He tilted his head. His voice was quiet, hollow. She can't see me. The air shifted. Lisa shivered. It just got cold in here, she muttered. Are you feeling okay? You look pale. I forced a nod. Yeah. I just... Never mind. Lisa changed the subject, talking about something at work, but I wasn't listening. I was watching Elias. He was smiling at me, a smile that didn't belong on a child's face, a knowing smile, a smile that said, you see me. That's all that matters. I didn't bring up the incident with Lisa again. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe it was a weird joke I wasn't in on. I told myself anything to keep from admitting the truth, that Elias wasn't normal, but ignoring it didn't help, because Elias knew things he shouldn't. It started small. One morning, I was drinking coffee, scrolling through my phone, when he spoke without looking up from his book. Your boss is going to call in 3 minutes. I blinked. What? He turned a page. He'll say you need to cover for Mark. Mark is sick. I opened my mouth to argue, to ask how the hell he would know that. Then my phone rang. I stared at the screen. My boss. My skin crawled. I let it go to voicemail. My hands were cold and clammy as I turned to Elias. How did you? He just smiled, like he'd been waiting for me to ask. I just know. The way he said it. So calm, so sure. Like he knew other things too. Things I didn't want to hear. The next time I tried to ignore the truth, it came back in a worse way. It was late. Too late. I should have been asleep. But something about the house felt wrong. Like the walls were listening. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the gallery, just to distract myself. I had taken a few pictures of Elias in the past week. Just normal things. Him reading, sitting by the window, looking at the TV. But as I flicked through them, my stomach dropped. He wasn't there. Picture after picture. Empty rooms. The chair where he had been sitting, empty. The window where he had been watching the rain. No one there. My chest tightened. I felt like I was going to be sick. I knew I had taken those photos. I knew he had been there. I scrolled faster, fingers shaking. And then, The very last photo wasn't one I had taken. It was a selfie of me, lying in bed, fast asleep, and in the background, standing right by my head, was Elias. His face too close, his eyes wide open, and his lips almost touching my ear, like he had been whispering something to me in my sleep. My heart slammed against my ribs. I dropped the phone like it burned. I whipped around, but Elias was already standing in the doorway, watching me, smiling. "You don't need pictures to remember me." His voice was soft, too soft, like he was already inside my head. I stopped taking photos after that night, stopped asking questions, stopped trying to convince myself that Elias was a normal child, because he wasn't. I knew that now. I didn't know what he was, but he wasn't a boy. Not really. He played the part well, sat at the kitchen table like any other kid, turned the pages of his books, tilted his head when I spoke to him, but there was something off about the way he moved, the way his dark eyes never quite blinked at the right times. I started to notice how he never coughed, never sneezed, never even sniffled. His clothes never got dirty. His hair never seemed to grow. It was like he was stuck in a loop of himself, repeating a version of what a child should be. But it was the whispering at night that broke me. It started as faint murmurs, just beyond the edge of my hearing. I'd lie in bed, exhausted, staring at the ceiling, and there it was, a hushed voice, slipping through the walls like a draft. At first, I thought it was the wind, or maybe the pipes settling, but the more I listened, the more I realized that it was words, low, steady, murmuring something just beneath understanding, something that sounded so close to my ear that I'd whip around, expecting to see Elias standing there in the dark, but he never was. The house would be still, empty, as though nothing had ever been wrong, until I woke up one night, and he was standing right next to my bed. I don't know what time it was. The room was pitch black except for the glow of the street lamp bleeding through the curtains. I woke up because I felt something, a presence, a pressure in the air, thick and heavy, curling around my throat. My body went rigid before my brain even caught up. Before I even realized I wasn't alone, Elias was there, inches from my face, not moving, not speaking, just watching. His eyes were wide, too wide, reflecting the dim light like an animal's. His small, pale hands were at his sides, unmoving, perfectly still. For a long, suffocating moment, neither of us spoke. I couldn't. My throat locked up, and my body screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. It was like my limbs weren't mine anymore. And then he leaned down. His lips brushed against my ear, and in a voice that was so much older than a child's, so much deeper than it should have been, he whispered, "I know where you go when you dream." The air in my lungs vanished. I lurched back, scrambling against the headboard, my heart pounding violently. But Elias, he just straightened up and smiled, the same eerie, calm smile that did not belong to a child. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out of my room. I sat there for hours, clutching the blankets, afraid to close my eyes, afraid of what he meant, afraid of what I might see when I slept. I started keeping my bedroom door locked at night. Not that I thought it would make a difference. If Elias wanted to get in, I was certain he could. The lock was a symbol, nothing more. A flimsy, desperate attempt to pretend I still had some control over my own home, over my own life. But things were getting worse. Rooms felt bigger than they should. I'd walk into the kitchen, and for a split second, the space stretched, the walls seeming to pull farther away as though I had just stepped into something else entirely. The mirrors in the house became wrong. I avoided them after I caught a glimpse of my reflection one morning, because for the briefest moment, the me in the mirror didn't move at the same time I did. I turned my head, but my reflection was just a beat too slow. I stepped away from the sink and saw, in the corner of my eye, that my mirror self was still staring directly at me, and Elias was always watching. His gaze was impossible to ignore. It wasn't the normal, absent-minded stare of a child. It was deep, searching, like he was looking through me, past me, inside me, like he knew everything. And every time I met his gaze, I felt the overwhelming, suffocating urge to look away first. Then I found the door. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was cleaning, trying to keep myself busy, trying to ignore the fact that I had stopped talking to anyone outside my house because what would I say? That I had adopted a child who didn't exist, that I wasn't sure if I was losing my mind, or if something much worse was happening to me. That's when I noticed it. The door in the hallway, a door I had never seen before. I stopped cold. My heart thudded violently in my chest as I stared at it. It wasn't new. It wasn't like someone had built it overnight. It looked old. Just as old as the rest of the house, with peeling paint and a brass knob that was so cold to the touch that it burned my fingertips. But it had never been there before. I was sure of it. I turned, calling over my shoulder, "Elias?" No answer. I turned the knob. Locked. I rattled it harder. It did not budge. That's when I noticed the whispering. The same whispering I heard at night, but this time, it was coming from behind the door. A single hushed voice. Low, steady, waiting. The house felt wrong. The walls pressing closer. The whispering grew louder. My breath hitched as I pressed my ear against the wood. And I realized something horrible. It wasn't one voice. It was many, all whispering at once, all saying my name. I stumbled back, heart pounding, slamming my hands over my ears. But the whispering was inside my head now, crawling under my skin, filling my lungs. I turned away, panic coiling in my stomach. And that's when I saw Elias standing at the end of the hallway, watching. His eyes were black now, completely black. A slow, knowing smile stretched across his lips. And then he spoke. You shouldn't have found that. I didn't sleep that night. I locked my bedroom door, sat on the bed with my back against the wall, and waited. I could still hear the whispering, faint now, muffled behind the old wooden door in the hallway, but it wasn't gone. Just waiting, like it knew I was listening. Elias never went to bed. I didn't hear him move, didn't hear his door open, or his small footsteps on the floorboards. But I knew he was awake. I could feel him somewhere in the house, watching, waiting, just like the whispers. By the time morning came, I had made up my mind. I had to open that door. I don't know why. It was a horrible idea. I knew it was a horrible idea, but some part of me felt like I had already crossed the line, like pretending everything was fine wasn't going to work anymore. Something inside my home had changed, and ignoring it was letting it grow stronger. I grabbed a screwdriver from the kitchen drawer. My hands were unsteady, my breath uneven, but I forced myself forward, one slow step at a time, until I was standing in front of the door again. It looked the same as yesterday, peeling paint, old brass knob, ice cold to the touch. But as I stood there, I realized something was different. The whispering had stopped, not faded, not lessened, stopped completely. The silence was thick, unnatural. It felt like the whole house was holding its breath, watching me. I gripped the screwdriver, jammed it between the door and the frame, and twisted, forcing the lock to snap with a sharp crack. The door swung open. I stared inside, and my mind refused to understand what I was seeing. It wasn't a room, not really. It was a space, too deep, too dark, stretching farther than the house should allow. The floor was black, glossy, reflecting the dim hallway light like wet glass. The walls pulsed, alive, shifting in slow rhythmic movements like something breathing. And in the center of the room, there was a bed. My bed. I stepped forward before I could stop myself, my breath sharp in my throat. It was identical, same sheets, same pillows, same imprint of my body on the mattress. The realization hit me all at once. This wasn't just any bed. It was the bed I had slept in last night. I took a shaky step back. The air in the room was thick, heavy, wrong, like walking through water. My vision blurred for a second, and when it cleared, I noticed there was someone lying in the bed, a figure, curled up under the blankets, facing away from me. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My body was frozen, every part of me screaming to run, to slam the door shut, to never come back. But then, the figure in the bed twitched. The blankets shifted, and I saw a glimpse of pale skin, dark hair. My stomach dropped, because I knew who it was. It was me. I stumbled back, slamming into the hallway wall. My vision swam, my brain refusing to process what I was looking at. The me in the bed shifted again, slowly, painfully, like something trying to wake up. And then, it turned its head toward me. I didn't see its face. I didn't want to. I threw myself backward into the hall, slamming the door shut so hard the walls shook. I locked it, once, twice, 3 times, then stumbled away, gasping for breath, hands shaking violently. That's when I heard Elias's voice, calm, amused. I told you not to open it. I don't remember going to bed that night. I don't remember eating, or drinking, or even thinking. I just remember sitting in the kitchen, staring at the table, trying not to exist, because I had seen something I wasn't supposed to see, something that should not have been real. But the house didn't care. It moved on without me. I barely noticed as the daylight faded, swallowed by the thick, oppressive darkness that had begun clinging to the house like mold. I was still sitting in the same chair when I realized Elias was gone. I hadn't seen him all day. No footsteps, no small voice echoing through the house. I should have been relieved, but the air felt wrong, too still, too expectant, like the house was waiting for me to notice. And then, as if on cue, a soft creak came from the hallway. The door to my bedroom slowly swung open. My blood went cold, because someone was standing there. Not Elias, not some shadow in the dark. I was standing in the doorway. Same hair, same clothes, same face, but it wasn't me. I felt that instantly. The thing wearing my face tilted its head, just slightly. Then it smiled, and every part of me locked up with pure, overwhelming terror. It wasn't just a smile, it was wrong, stretched too wide, too many teeth, not human. And then it spoke, in my voice. Why do you look so scared? I ran, didn't think, didn't look back, just bolted for the front door, my body moving before my mind could catch up. My hands fumbled with the locks, my breath coming in short, desperate gasps. Behind me, I heard it moving closer, not walking, slithering, like something trying to figure out how to use my body. I yanked the door open and threw myself outside. The cold night air hit me like a slap, and for a moment, I thought maybe I had escaped. Then I looked up, and my stomach dropped, because the house wasn't the same house anymore. The windows were wrong, the walls were too tall, and the sky above me was completely black. No stars, no moon, just nothing. I had left the house, but I hadn't left it all. I was somewhere else, somewhere Elias had been leading me all along, and I had walked right into it. The air outside didn't feel real. It was cold, but not in the way winter was cold. There was no wind, no movement. The temperature was just wrong, like the absence of heat rather than the presence of cold. The sky above me stretched forever, an endless black void, thick and heavy like a ceiling pressing down. My house loomed behind me, but it wasn't my house anymore. The roof was too high, the windows were too dark, too empty. The walls didn't even seem to be made of wood anymore. They had shifted, something else pulsing beneath the surface like it was alive. I shouldn't have left. I thought the door was an escape. I thought if I ran, if I just got outside, I'd be free. But now I understood. The house was never trapping me. It was guiding me. It had been leading me here all along. The world beyond the house wasn't a neighborhood. There were no streets, no houses, no city, just an endless field of black grass stretching into the distance. It moved slightly, even without wind, like something breathing just beneath the surface. And at the center of it all, Elias was waiting for me. I spotted him standing just a few feet away, calm as ever, his dark eyes locked onto mine. He wasn't afraid. He never had been. He looked at me like this was exactly where I was supposed to be, like I had finally arrived. My breath hitched in my throat. Where are we? Elias smiled, tilting his head just slightly. Home. I swallowed hard. This isn't home. My voice came out thin, uncertain. His expression didn't change. It is. You just don't remember yet. A shiver crawled down my spine. Elias, what are you? He blinked at me slowly, like I had asked the wrong question. Then, in that small, quiet voice, he said, I'm yours. Something about those two words made my stomach drop, because he wasn't lying. I didn't remember when things started backing away. My feet moved on their own, stepping back toward the house. But as I did, I noticed something else. A shape, a figure standing in the dark, far away, too far to make out the details. But the longer I looked, the more I realized. There were more than one. There were hundreds, standing in the black grass, silent, watching, waiting. Some were tall, some were small, some hunched, their limbs too long, their heads tilted too far, but all of them were staring directly at me. I felt sick. I turned back to Elias. I want to go home. He tilted his head the other way, smiled. You are home. And then, the figures in the field started moving. I ran, didn't think, didn't breathe, just ran. The moment the figures stepped forward, the world shifted. The black grass lurched, bending under their weight like something sinking into flesh. The air thickened, a low hum vibrating through the ground, crawling up my legs, squeezing my chest. The house was wrong, but it was the only thing I recognized, the only place that still felt like mine, even if it wasn't, even if it never had been. I sprinted toward it, my legs aching, the whispers behind me growing louder. I couldn't make out words, but I felt them, crawling under my skin, slipping into my bones, trying to pull me backward. Elias wasn't running. He was walking, slow, steady, like he knew I wouldn't get far. I hit the porch at full speed, nearly collapsing against the door as I fumbled for the handle. It was hot, too hot. My fingers burned, but I didn't let go. I yanked it open and threw myself inside, slamming it shut just as something heavy slammed against it from the other side. My body shook. I backed away, gasping for breath, heart hammering. The whisper stopped. Silence. Then, a single knock, soft where gentle, like Elias was politely asking to come in. I squeezed my eyes shut. Number. No, no, no. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But when I opened my eyes, I saw something worse. The house had changed again. It wasn't my home anymore. It was nothing but hallways, endless, twisting, stretching in every direction. I turned sharply, my pulse pounding in my skull. The walls were covered in doors, old and rotting. Some cracked open just enough to show darkness on the other side. The air was wrong, heavy with something thick and damp. And then, a sound, not from the door behind me, from above. I looked up, and my breath stopped. There were people on the ceiling, or rather, things that looked like people, dozens of them. Their bodies stretched and bent, their arms too long, their jaws unhinged, eyes black and empty, staring down at me. They didn't move, they just hung there, watching. And then, one of them smiled, slowly, like they had been waiting for me to see them. I staggered backward, my pulse slammed against my ribs. A whisper slithered through the room. "You took him in." I turned violently, but there was no one there. Just the hallways, just the endless twisting doors. Another whisper, "He belongs to you now." The house shuddered. The doors creaked open, just slightly, as if the house itself had exhaled. And behind every door, something was moving. I didn't move. I couldn't. The house shifted around me, groaning like it was alive. The whispers from the doors grew louder, wrapping around my skull, slithering inside me. My breath came in short, shallow gasps as the things on the ceiling continued to stare, unblinking, their stretched faces frozen in silent, awful smiles. And then one of the doors swung open, a crack at first, then wider. I didn't want to look, but my body did it for me. The darkness inside wasn't empty, it pulsed, alive, shifting like something was waiting just beneath the surface. A deep, slow breath exhaled from within, warm, damp, too human and not human at all. And then, from inside that impossible blackness, something stepped forward. It wasn't Elias. It was me, the other me, the one I had seen in the bed, the one that had stared at me with dead, empty eyes before I slammed the door shut. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace, its body slightly off, slightly wrong, like it wasn't used to wearing skin. I took a shaking step back. My voice barely came out. What are you?" The other me smiled. It was the same wrong stretching smile Elias had. Then it spoke. "I'm the part of you that never left." The house shuddered. The doors flew open, one after another, revealing rooms that should not exist. Some of them had people inside, people that looked like me. Some of them were staring at the walls, muttering to themselves. Some were sleeping, their bodies twisted into unnatural angles, as if they had been laying there for centuries. Some were watching me. And then Elias stepped beside my other self, his wide black eyes unblinking. "You never left." His voice was soft, final. I shook my head violently. No, that wasn't true. I had a life before Elias, a job, a home, friends. I was real. But when I tried to remember how I got here, when I tried to trace the days, the months, the years, there was nothing. A hole where my memories should be, a space, a void. My other self stepped closer. "You took me in." It smiled. "And now it's time to let go." I staggered back, my heart hammering, my mind screaming at me to run, but there was nowhere left to go. And as I turned, I saw a door at the end of the hallway, the only door that was still closed. It wasn't like the others. It wasn't old or rotting. It was perfect, smooth, clean, and unlike the rest of the house. It felt familiar. I didn't think. I ran for it. The whispers screamed. The figures on the ceiling lurched forward. Elias and my other self reached for me, but I didn't stop. I threw myself at the door, grabbed the handle, and yanked it open. And on the other side, there was nothing but light. The first thing I felt was air, real air, not the thick, unnatural stillness of the house, but a breeze, soft, warm, alive. The second thing I felt was the sun, not the endless black sky, not the crushing emptiness of the other world, just light. And then I woke up. I gasped, my chest burning, my body cold and stiff like I had been asleep for too long. My vision was blurry, my mind sluggish. But the moment I looked around, my breath caught in my throat. I was in a hospital bed. Machines beeped beside me. An IV dripped into my arm. The air smelled of antiseptic and something else, something old. A doctor rushed to my side. "Oh my God, you're awake." His voice was full of genuine shock. We didn't think you were going to come back." I stared at him, my heart racing. My mouth was dry. My voice barely worked. How long?" The doctor hesitated. His eyes darkened. "You've been in a coma for almost 6 months." My stomach dropped. I felt like I was falling. 6 months. 6. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. My brain was struggling to catch up. The doctor was saying something about an accident, about how I had been found unconscious in my home. But none of it made sense. Because I remembered now. I remembered Elias. I remembered the house that wasn't a house. I remembered my other self. And I remembered the truth. I hadn't adopted Elias. I hadn't found him. He had found me. He had been waiting, lurking in the spaces between consciousness and something else. And when I had fallen into sleep, into the coma, he had finally been able to reach me, to take me into his world, to keep me. But somehow, I had escaped. The doctor was still speaking, but his words sounded far away. My heart was pounding because I suddenly felt it again. That familiar chill in the air, that sense of being watched. And as I turned my head, my stomach flipped. The hospital window had a reflection, and in the glass, standing right behind me, was Elias. He smiled and whispered, "You woke up this time." The monitor beside me flatlined. The light in the room flickered, and then everything went black. Well, that was pretty much it. I hope you liked the story. I'll catch up with you in the next creepy story.